1997 was the year of Spice Mania, the year Princess Diana died, Mike Fletcher's testimonial year, and for supporters of Hull Kingston Rovers, the year the sky almost fell in on their beloved club. The next decade would prove to be a rollercoaster ride for the club and its supporters, with the threat of imminent closure 1 minute, followed by raised optimism, only for these hopes to be dashed as quickly as they arose. Thankfully, through the expertise and efforts of many people, the club has managed to come through those dark days of despair and now stands on the brink of a new and exciting era, with our first ever Super League match due to be played on Saturday, February the 10th against Wakefield Trinity. Rumours had been circulating in East Hull for a number of years about the poor financial situation at the club, but it was still a huge shock to the Red and White Army when on the 13th of January 1997, following an application to the courts by the Board of Directors of Hull Kingston Rovers, that PricewaterhouseCoopers were appointed administrators of the club. The A-team tasked with securing the future of Hull Kingston Rovers was led by Edward Klemke, supported by David Fornell, who was responsible for the club on a day-to-day basis. If the directors at that time had not applied for the club to be put in administration, would we have been here today? We will never know, but that action triggered a series of events over the years which ended in success almost 10 years later at the Halliwell Jones Stadium in Warrington. One of Mr Klemke's first phone calls on his arrival in the hot seat was from a certain Tim Wilby. Wilby was a former Hull FC player who in fact had scored a try for the Dark Side in the 1980 Challenge Cup final. Wilby's sole intention was to merge Hull Kingston Rovers with Hull FC in order to obtain a Super League franchise. To our eternal gratitude, Mr Klemke and his team were focused only on selling Hull Kingston Rovers as a going concern and were determined that the club would continue under its own identity. The approach from Wilby was quickly rebuffed. Not long after the Wilby telephone call, Mr Klemke was approached by an Irish consortium. They blew any credibility they had out of the water when they claimed that the deal hinged on Steve Crooks remaining at Craven Park, describing him as the best young coach in the game. The feeling at the time was that this was Wilby in disguise, and again Mr Klemke stood firm. On the field, Rovers reached Wembley for the first time since 1986, recording a resounding victory over Hunslet in the plate final, with star man Stanley Jean scoring a hat-trick of tries.
And he's going to make it! Hat-trick time!
The team, which in the previous season had gained promotion, finished 8th in the league, coached initially by Steve Crooks, whose timing of his resignation was very suspicious. His successor was Dave Harrison. Hull FC won promotion, therefore ending the interests of Tim Wilby. Before the Black and Whites went up, Rovers give them a little reminder of the passion and never say die spirit of what wearing the red and white of Hull Kingston Rovers is all about at Bulfrey Park. In November 1997, realising the club was experiencing difficulties in securing players for the following season, supporters Keith Lyon and Ian Adge Cutler held a meeting with Dave Harrison and Wayne Parker, which directly led to the forming of the Rovers Supporters Group. This group would over the years provide financial support to the club, which to this day would still prove invaluable. The RSG started fundraising events, and the Robins faithful have subsequently backed Keith and Adge's vision by signing up to become members. 1998 saw the start of Paul Fletcher's testimonial year. The financial situation and speculation of possible takeovers continued to dominate the news regarding the club. Rumours of a Scottish millionaire being prepared to buy Rovers circulated, and a second mystery millionaire had apparently made an initial inquiry. Talks and discussions with supermarket chain Morrison's failed to materialise any positive news, and a bid in the region of £400,000 from Malcolm Pearson was rejected. On the playing side, with Barry Lilly still at the helm as chairman, and Dave Harrison in his first full season as club coach, assisted by Rovers old boy Wayne Parker, the Robins had a season in which they challenged at the top of the table. They eventually finished second to a Wakefield side they had beaten on 3 occasions during the campaign. In the playoffs, Wakefield finally got the better of the Rovers side to enable them to reach the grand final at the first attempt. Rovers then crashed out of the playoffs with a heavy home defeat to Featherstone Rovers. Positives in 1998 were the shirt sponsorship by Neil Hudgell. During the season, the RSG assisted the club in the signing of 2 Australian players, Jamie Kennedy and Danny Brown, paying for their flights and accommodation, and also helped with the signing of former Rovers Colt Mike Dixon. As we went into the final year of the millennium, again rumours and whispers amongst the fans were at the forefront of discussion. Yorkshire-based businessman Paul Caddick pulled out of talks with the club following a series of disagreements with the council. It was again the Lilly-Harrison combination at the head of operations, with Neil Hudgell continuing his shirt sponsorship. Barry Lilly bravely faced the fans to clarify the current situation regarding the club's status and the hopes for the future. On the field, Rovers could not match the success of the previous season in terms of challenging at the head of the table and finished a disappointing 6th in the league. The RSG was now a proven lifeline to the Hulkingston Rovers club, as they contributed to the signings of Fetu Taiwa, a Challenge Cup winner during his spell at the Sheffield Eagles, experienced wingman Richard Smith, big Aussie prop David Luckwell, and local lads Chris Kitchen and Alex Thompson. The end of the season brought sad but expected news that the jewel in the crown, Stanley Jean, was to leave the Robins in search of Super League rugby. He signed for the Gateshead Thunder side, being assembled by Sean McRae, or so he thought. The year 2000 was when Rovers finally gained some stability. Rovers were sold to the tune of £650,000, with the rescue package headed by the Gain Group Consortium and the Hull City Council. Don Robinson, a man more associated with Hull City, replaced Barry Lilly as the chairman of Hulkingston Rovers. The RSG again proved a valuable source of funding, contributing to the recruitment of Leroy Joe, Mike Dixon, John Ray, Richard Slater, Chris Charles and Andy Smith. All these players wore the famous red and white shirt, again bearing the name of Neil Hudgell, during the season ahead. A season in which Rovers, again coached by Dave Harrison, finished in 7th place in the league. Apart from the takeover of the club, the most significant event of the year was the sponsored walk from East Park to Craven Park, entitled Rovers on the March. The walk took place on Sunday, 19th of March, prior to the home match against Swinton. Supporters of all ages turned out to be there in thousands, raising around £25,000, with £3,000 going back into the amateur rugby league teams and local schools. The success of the walk proved that the heartbeat of Hulkingston Rovers, its fans, would go all out to ensure the Red Red Robin would continue bobbing along. In 2001, Hulkingston Rovers came out of administration and agreed to a CVA in order to attempt to get the club back on an even keel. The club parted company with coach Dave Harrison 2 weeks before the start of the season, and he was replaced by academy coach Gary Wilkinson. Shirt sponsorship was provided by Kingston Communications, with the logo Just One Look adorning the famous shirt. The RSG again supported the club at every opportunity and assisted in the signings of Richard Wilson, Rob Wilson, Richie Hayes, Jamie Boville, John Aston and Mike Dixon. The Robins matched the efforts of the previous season on the pitch with a 7th place finish and received a visit from French team Toulouse in the Challenge Cup, emerging victorious by 44 points to 0. Rovers had a new chairman in place at the start of the 2002 season in the shape of Wayne Smith. Coach Gary Wilkinson lifted Rovers to a 4th place finish and took them to the Buddies National Cup final, where they faced Stanley Jean and his Huddersfield teammates. The full-time, former Super League outfit proved too strong for the Robins. During the season, which marked Paul Fletcher's 15th year at the club, Rovers were drawn to play against the Russian side Kazan Arrows, which resulted in a 40-10 victory. Needless to say, the RSG again provided backup for the club, contributing to the signings of Bobby Everett, Craig Farrell, Linton Stott, Alistair McLaren, Jimmy Walker and Chris Charles. With just one look, again on the shirt front, Rovers went into the playoffs with optimism, but were defeated by Oldham to bring the curtain down on another year. In 2003 saw all change at the head of the club. Colin McNichol took over the chair, replacing Wayne Smith, whose final act was to remove coach Gary Wilkinson and install the first ever overseas coach of Hull Kingston Rovers in Australian Steve Linnane. Linnane made former Wigan prop Harvey Howard his assistant, as well as signing him as a player, but a traffic incident in which he sustained a back injury ended Howard's career. Rovers also had a chief executive in place, a role occupied by former Robin Nick Halafifi. P&D Engineering were the proud sponsors of Rovers' shirt. Linnane brought a good style of play to the Robins this season, which resulted in a very respectable third place finish. A playoff victory at Rochdale raised hopes of a first ever grand final appearance. But Rovers' season finished in defeat in the playoffs, away at Leigh. Again, the relegated Super League team dominated the division, in this instance being a Salford side which had added Chris Charles to its ranks prior to the start of the season. Being full-time, it appeared, was the key to promotion to Super League, although Rovers did give Salford a tough time during their clashes that season. The RSG, with a contribution to the signings of Adam Sullivan, Jimmy Walker, John Aston and Mark Blanchard, had at this point helped bring 30 players to Hull Kingston Rovers since 1997. The position as coach of Hull Kingston Rovers looked to have become a hot potato as a new season brought in yet another new face to the job. 2 faces in fact, as Martin Hall and Malcolm Riley became joint first team coaches brought in by chairman Colin McNichol. With P&D Engineering again on the shirt, additional funding came from who else but the RSG, who amazingly helped to bring 7 players onto the playing rota: Paul Manson, Phil Hasty, Craig Poucher, Paul Pickering, Dale Holdstock, Anthony Seabold and Frank Wattini. Rovers drew French side UTC at home in the Challenge Cup, where controversial refereeing decisions saw them edged out by 23 points to 22. By the close of the season, Reilly had departed and Hall took Rovers to a third place finish. Again, the curse of the playoffs struck as a Rovers side were beaten by underdogs Featherstone Rovers at home. In 2005, and surprise surprise, Martin Hall had left the Robins due to personal reasons. Neil Hudgell, a Rovers ball boy as a youngster, sponsor, then board member, became the new chairman of Hull Kingston Rovers. He installed Harvey Howard as the new coach of Hull Kingston Rovers. Howard made some excellent signings as he brought James Webster to East Hull from Parramatta. David Tangata-Toa was another addition, along with John Steele. The RSG contributed monthly set payments to enable the captures of Leroy Rivette, Jamie Beauville, Macaulay Azu and the progressive Andy Raleigh. New sponsors for the Robins came in the shape of Platform 1, who not only bore the name at the front of the shirt, but refurbished the existing bars in the Roger Millward stand, and also built a new bar underneath the East stand. Rovers, along with Castleford and Whitehaven, were amongst the pace setters as National League One started to take shape. When the draw for the Challenge Cup was made and Rovers drew French side UTC away, an invasion of Perpignan was made by the red and white fans. So one cup dream was over, but Rovers were progressing well in the Northern Rail Cup. Unexpectedly, Rovers dispensed with the services of coach Harvey Howard, and captain James Webster was asked to take charge of team affairs until a replacement could be installed. Webster led the side to 9 consecutive victories with an exciting attacking style of rugby on show, although he made it clear that his role at the club was as a player. So Neil Hudgell took the time to find the right man for the job. He selected a young Australian coach named Justin Morgan, who had performed a minor miracle in taking Toulouse into the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup. A deal was agreed, and after his commitments to Toulouse were completed, he would become the new coach of Hull KR. Morgan took on a watching brief as Rovers made it to the Northern Rail Cup final and a clash with the Castleford Tigers. Winning at Blackpool raised the expectation levels of the Rovers faithful as the playoffs got underway. But again, those hopes were crushed as a Halifax side beat an under-par Rovers to end the dreams of Super League for another season. The club's profile was raised as it was awarded the accolade of National League Club of the Year, and Andy Raleigh was named National League One Player of the Season. Going into 2006, big decisions were made at Craven Park. The pitch was widened for beginning of the new season. The Dogs and Speedway was removed from Craven Park. Chairman Neil Hudgell and Chief Executive Paul Lakin gave Justin Morgan the go-ahead to build a squad of players who would be given full-time contracts. Morgan drew up a hit list of players and the recruitment drive went into a frenzy. The club's supporters, more used to last-minute signings being brought in over the last decade, stood back and saw the list of new additions grow in disbelief. The RSG did their bit as ever, providing monthly instalments towards the signings of Byron Ford and the highly rated Scott Morrell. So after a January training camp and 3 pre-season hit-outs, the season got underway. Rovers cruised to some big early wins, with new signings Ben Cockayne and Ben Fisher, showing that real quality had been brought to the club. Win after win saw the Robins progress in the Northern Rail Cup and quickly establish a lead at the top of the league table. Relegated Super League teams Leigh and Widnes were both dispatched in early season, as it became clear that it would need a good side to defeat Hull Kingston Rovers. Records tumbled as Rovers amassed cricket scores against Halifax and Whitehaven. French centre Damien Couturier kicked 14 goals in one game to etch his name into Rovers history books. With Rovers' winning run standing at 17 matches, Super League Warrington Wolves arrived at Craven Park, heralded as the team that would put Rovers firmly in their place. Cup success was being chased on 2 fronts as Rovers again made the Northern Rail Cup final by the seaside. This year's opponents, the Leigh Centurions.
From Griggs for Rowley, and this is the reply they needed, and what a great riposte it is.
So Rovers finally tasted defeat, but in beating Widnes 1 week later, almost assured themselves of a top place finish. The Cup story still had a chapter to complete as Rovers lined up in their first Challenge Cup semi-final for 20 years. St Helens were the opponents, a team many consider the best in the world.
That's why St Helens are dangerous. Here comes Cunningham down the middle. Support from Sean Long. We're going to get the game's first try. Despite the chase from Morton, it is Sean Long.
The success of the season began to take its toll on the squad as tired legs and bumps and bruises began to hurt more. Justin Morgan rested several key players at Leigh and Whitehaven, which resulted in the only league defeats of the campaign. As the season moved into September, all attention turned towards the playoffs. In the first v second place grand final eliminator, the Robins defeated the Widnes Vikings for the 3rd time. They had reached their first ever grand final. So Warrington, Sunday, October the 8th, 2006. Rovers' date with destiny. We knew we had the best team. We knew we had the best coach. We knew we had the best fans.
16 metres out, Fisher off foot, Connor, Bamford, yes! Bamford! Across the on Bamford! Great defence, in comes Makali Azu. Yes! Yes! Oh, what a tackle! Offloads to Mawson, but Mawson again. Webster. Oh, it's a try! It's a try for Pat Larsner!
So 10 years in the life of Hull Kingston Rovers. We went from the darkness of January 1997 to the bright lights of Super League in October 2006. There are many people, companies and organisations who have played a significant role in this epic journey. Some have been mentioned earlier. Others like P&D Engineering rarely get the recognition and plaudits they deserve. But it is to the supporters who have stood by the club through the bad and good times who deserve all the accolades. Without them, there would not be a Hull Kingston Rovers. Finally, what happened to Tim Wilby, I hear you ask? Well, he took the tradesman's entrance to Rugby League oblivion, but it is fitting that he is allowed to have the last say.
Unfortunately, it's like the jungle out there. Only the strong survive. The weak get killed off, and that's what's happened in Hull at the moment. Unfortunately, but that's the way it is. Gone are the days when people could support two rugby league teams. We can't do it anymore. They'll run to the end of the season, and then that's it. They'll be gone. There'll be no more Kingston Rovers. There's no room for them.